people?
Yes,
Thank you. So that hopefully other people can see this after we have this meeting tonight. So what we will do is we will have a question and answer time at the end of this presentation. And saying that, I have Reverend Mary Crist here, who I'll introduce, but we also have a guest that I was not aware of until a few days ago. And she is Native American from our county. And her name is Julie, and forgive me if I say your name wrong. Julie Tamati.
Take the vowels. Take the syllables.
Take the syllables.
Yeah.
Julie Tumatmit.
Close. Yeah.
Okay, say it for us.
Thank
Julie.
you, Terry. Tumamayat.
Okay, and what is your heritage?
My heritage on my mother's side is Mexican from Guanajuato, and it is on my father's side that we carry the native Chumash ancestry.
Chumash,
Both
that's
his
what I thought.
parents were Chumash. His mother was half, her father being from Sonora, Mexico, and we all grew up here in the Ventura County, but our ancestry spans the 7,000 square miles of territory and several Channel Islands.
Wow, so we are glad you're here tonight. Thank you.
I'm glad to be here too. Paul Schrimmer invited me and told me about this. I do a lot of interfaith work. I love it. And it's really important for us to share our beliefs and our sacredness in this world.
So thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So also, at the end, we'll have question and answer time. And Tim will take a poll towards at the time we do the question and answer. We like to do a survey to see how we're doing. And if you have any suggestions, my apologies. For some reason, we're having an unstable night, and we've never had this happen since we've been doing this. So I hope you continued without my presence. Did everybody was able to hear what Julie said? Also, Larry wanted to introduce Sally Prim. Would you like to speak to that, Sarah, Larry?
Well, I even had my microphone on. Yeah, Sally's one of the chairs of the Friends of Navajo Land, which is an organization sponsored by the Diocese of Navajo Land. And
so,
go ahead.
I was just going to say I had all these people and had no idea, and we looked for months. So what a gift. I feel like it's very much a gift. So at this time, I want to introduce, before I freeze again, let me introduce Reverend Mary Crist. Reverend Canon Mary Crist, Dr. Reverend Mary Crist is enrolled Blackfeet from the Douglas family in Montana. She is a priest in the Episcopal Diocese of Los Angeles, serving at St. Michael's Ministry Center in Riverside. She's a member of the presiding bishop's staff as the coordinator of Indigenous Theological Education in the Department of Ethnic Ministries. She's a visiting professor of education and Indigenous Studies at Bexley Seabury Seminary in Chicago. She has earned the Doctor of Education from Columbia University in New York, Master of Divinity from Claremont School of Theology, Master of Education from Pan American University, and Bachelor of Arts from the University of California, Berkeley. I feel like I should be bowing to you.
No.
She is the author of Fry Bread in Canaan and the Native Christian Perspectives on Reconciliation, both published in the First Peoples Theology Journal, as well as various articles in early childhood education, special education, and online instructional design. In 2022, she was named a Woman of Distinction for Province 8 of the National Episcopal Church Women. Crist is married to the Reverend Will Crist, who has been to St. Columba's, I know this. They are the parents of 2 children, 5 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you very, very much. And all titles aside, please, Mary is I'm quite happy with that title.
And you will be tested tonight because you have some great people here who ask really good questions. Right, Rabbi?
I've already got 3 written down.
Well, the first time I made a presentation on this general topic, I did not know it, but a local group of Native people came to vet my presentation.
Oh,
What I didn't know is that all of them were also Christians. And they asked me very difficult questions I couldn't understand because they basically don't have an answer also. And we became very, very good friends after that. The whole thing was a put up to see who was this woman who would presume to talk on this topic. You know, I didn't pretend to have a lot of answers, but the questioning part was fun. So
I will just interject that the answer to all such questions is God knows.
there you go. Wonderful. I like that. I
So-
definitely like that.
So one more input here. If you
Sure.
could put questions in the chat for Mary and possibly for Julie here too, then what I try to do is coordinate them in groups so that they flow. I
Okay.
work at that. It doesn't always work, but I do try to do that so that we're not disjointed and we kind of keep
Sure.
a flow. So Mary, please go for it and you're welcome to share.
Thank you. Well, here we'll go with the sharing attempt. And oh, okay. Are we
We-
good to go on your
we-
side?
We see you.
All right. Then I should tell you that this is a subset of a 3-hour in-person workshop that I did in Seattle at the cathedral. And I spent a lot of time putting it together, but tonight we're 1 hour shorter. So some of this I had to take out some pieces from it, but we will tonight try to cover some things that hopefully will generate some questions, but also generate some follow-up for you to do on your own time. I think you'll have fun with it. Let us open together with a prayer. O great Spirit, God of all people in every tribe, through whom all people are related, call us to the kinship of all your people. Grant us vision to see through the lens of our holy covenants the brokenness of the past. Help us to listen to you and to one another in order to heal the wounds of the present. And give us courage, patience, and wisdom to work together for healing and hope for all of your people now and in the future. Mend the hoop of our hearts and let us live in justice and peace through Jesus Christ, the one who comes to all people, that we might live in dignity. Amen. Did you know that the Episcopal Church has over 400 years of history with Indigenous people in North America? Did you know that many Indigenous spiritual beliefs are compatible with those of Jesus? Did you know that Indigenous people can be Christians and honor the spiritual practices of their ancestors at the same time? Today, we will discover how to use something called two-eyed seeing, vision quests, and sacred stories to explore Indigenous theology. We will explore what Indigenous leaders in the Episcopal Church say about being both Native and Christian, and how theological education is expanding. A favorite quote from C.S. Lewis: "We cannot go back and change the beginning, but what we can do is start where we are now and create a different ending." It is our tradition usually to introduce our relatives or to set a context for where we are coming from, and I'd like to do that now. On my mother's side, we come from the Blackfeet Nation in Montana. On my father's side, we come from Copenhagen, Denmark. It's quite a combination, both strong heritages, and I'm happy to say that my parents took great pains to make sure that we were grounded in both traditions. The Blackfeet Nation is a large group, a confederacy originally of 5 different groups. But when the boundary was drawn between Canada and the US, our people, the Amskapi Piikani, we got cut off and placed in Montana, and the Siksika and the Northern Pagan or Piikani and the Kainai people are in Alberta. And we are at the base of Glacier National Park presently. These are some of the Blackfeet women in my family. The woman on the right is my great, great, great grandmother, and her name was Mary Comes by Mistake. Mary, because every woman that had any association with a missionary got the name Mary. So my grandmother is also Mary, and even my Danish grandmother was Marie. So my name is Mary as well. But Mary Comes by Mistake was given that name because she was from the Cree Nation. And she and a Blackfeet man fell in love and got married, and he brought her to our reservation. And the Cree people from Canada were sort of enemies with the Blackfeet people. But she was apparently a wonderful person from everything I've been told. And she was accepted by the Blackfeet people, but they called her Comes by Mistake because they said she really didn't have any business on our land, but they still accepted her. And the people, the women on the picture on the left are my great grandmother, who is in the middle person on the lower row, and my grandmother, who is all the way to the left on the upper row. And there were also 3 brothers involved in the family. During relocation days in the 50s, the family left the reservation in Montana and relocated to Everett, Washington, north of Seattle. That was because there was really nothing to eat, and the government was relocating our people from the reservations into the city with the promise of housing and land and money and all of fantasy land. But my grandmother's brothers were able to find work at Boeing, and my grandmother and her sisters found work in Everett in the hospitals. They were nurses' aides in the hospitals. These are some cousins from the Blackfeet Reservation and my husband in the black shirt. And this is when we were getting ready to fly home from Montana a year ago. Our tradition is if we live off the reservation, we're expected to go home at least once a year. And I do that in the summer, but we missed a couple of summers during COVID. So last summer, we were really very happy to be able to go back to the reservation and see friends there and relatives. This is an example of how my people view the earth. My people call these mountains the backbone of Mother Earth. That's different from simply calling them the Rocky Mountains. This is the land of the Amskapi Piikani people in Montana. We're given the name Blackfeet by the colonizers, and we're called the Southern Robe Blackfeet because we are the southernmost nation in the confederacy of what is now 4 nations. In Canada, our cousins are called Blackfoot people, and our lands once included what is now called Glacier National Park. The mountain in the background here is called Chief Mountain. This is our most holy place, and it's on the border of our reservation with Canada. These warrior welcoming people are made by 2 brothers on our reservation who made them from found objects. And we have 2 warriors at each of the 4 major entrances to the reservation in Montana. If you keep in mind what I have said about the indigenous people and the land, I want to tell you that we view the land itself as our bridge to Creator. To lose our land means we lose our direct connection to our Creator. And this particular land that I'm showing you is along the Marias River. And in 1870, 173 Blackfeet people died. They were really massacred at this place. It's called the Baker Massacre. It was a surprise attack on Chief Heavy Runner's camp. And it was particularly egregious because Major Baker, who led the attack on these people, was drunk at the time, and he led his soldiers to the wrong encampment. He murdered 173 people who were sick with I started to say COVID. It was smallpox, and they were elderly women, children, and older men who were together to protect themselves during this illness. It's a terrible thing. I am related to Heavy Runner through marriage, and there is a mountain named for Heavy Runner in Glacier National Park, which we consider sacred. These are some of our ministries. I'm just showing you the context with the Episcopal Church. These were people at Standing Rock Reservation. And this was taken in 2016, the site of the Ocheti-Sacoan camp, where thousands of water protectors protested the installment of the Dakota Access Pipeline. The Episcopal Church was asked to stand with the tribe and the people of that region. And this was a big step toward healing the wrongs of the past, because people gathered, both native and non-native, from all over the country. We view it as a step in the right direction, although much more needs to be done, because so much of the land, as you know, was taken and not returned. And the reservations are such a small piece of the land that people actually should have had. These are some of the Indigenous clergy and leaders at the Church of the Good Shepherd in Fort Defiance, Arizona, during presiding Bishop Michael Curry's visit in 2018. The Navajo Land Area Mission was initiated in 1978, consolidating what had been parts of the Diocese of Arizona, Rio Grande, and Utah. This is Winter Talk, pre-COVID. It's an annual event where Indigenous Episcopalians gather to discuss what has happened in the church in the last year and what issues we want to address in the coming year. We also worship together, give thanks, and celebrate the blessings of the year. This one had 91 people present in Seattle, and the next year we were expecting to double that number, but that was the year of COVID. So we didn't get to meet in person for 2 years. We're hoping to meet on the Oneida Reservation in January of 2023. This is a group that I am part of in Los Angeles. It is open to all Indigenous women, and it was founded through grants for 3 years in a row from the Episcopal Church, specifically to build leadership among Indigenous women in LA, and especially those who are far from home or maybe disconnected from their Indigenous roots and relatives. So we have people from many, many different tribal traditions, and we meet on the first Saturday of every month, and we meet by Zoom every Tuesday night. And we have a Facebook page. If any of the Indigenous friends of your group are interested, or any of you who are here tonight, it's for women only. And the Facebook page is private because several of our women have been victims of domestic abuse, and they don't want their pictures open or the Facebook page open. But we have over 120 women in the group. This is the Native Youth event in 2019, which took place in South Dakota. And this is an intertribal group of young people, middle schoolers and high schoolers from across the US, and a few from Canada, and including some from Alaska. And this was Winter Talk in 2022. In our little boxes we are, and we did meet for 2 days and we did do our business, but it wasn't the same as being together. So we're really hoping that we were supposed to be on the Oneida Reservation last year in January, and it was a big celebration, but we had it canceled right from under us at the last minute. So we're really hoping to be able to go there again in January. These are some of the people who came to Winter Talk in person when we were in Seattle, and then they met in Lambeth Conference in 2022. These are some New Zealanders, and the man in the second from the right is my boss, the Reverend Brad Hoff from the Lakota Nation. And he is the missioner for the Native ministries of the Episcopal Church worldwide. So some people want to know, why would Indigenous people even consider joining any Christian church in the 19th century? Because of the colonization and assimilation processes. But there were 3 reasons for this. First of all, our own religious ceremonies were declared illegal by the US government, and this was the closest we had to be able to worship the Creator. Second, because many of us were trying to be strategic, and we thought that if we threw in with the colonizers, we would have a better chance of surviving. That didn't really work very well, because the Trail of Tears marched everyone, for example, from the North Carolina branch of the people, they just marched anyway and went into Oklahoma, even though they had tried very, very hard. The 5 civilized tribes, they were called, and the East Coast tried to play ball with the US government, thinking if they played ball, they would be able to survive and retain their lands. Of course, that wasn't true at all. And then many of us identified with the Christ figure as expressed and experienced in traditional stories and spiritual expressions. In fact, my husband and I did 13 years of short-term mission work in Alaska at Christmas and Easter time. And there we interviewed an elder who said, well, when the missionaries came through, it was really not that big a deal. And she went on to say, you know, we had Jesus anyway. We already had Jesus before they came through. And then she showed us how, and you'll see this later, she showed us how the values of the Athabascan people are completely aligned with the Christian values. Of course, those values were not acted out at all in the doctrine of discovery. They were completely the opposite of what they should have been. So let us explore a bit of Indigenous theology and our values. So what you see here in this graphic is the photo of a person on horseback overlooking the beauty of the land below. I chose it as an illustration of how Indigenous people see the world from a different perspective than other people. And in this case, we see it differently than the people in the cars driving on the road below. We see more than the road ahead. We are visually observant people, alert to all of the landscape from all the directions around us, as well as that above and below us. We see Creator present in the land and in all living things. We believe that we are all related. We pray to the 4 directions. We see the world organized around the sacred circle, and we live in community. For those who are Christians, we follow Jesus as an elder brother, the Holy One who walks with us, and we give thanks for the Holy Spirit within us. We bring sacred things from the earth into our worship communities: water, plants, feathers. We pray in song and in dance, listening to the heartbeat of Mother Earth in the drum. We honor our elders and those who have gone on before us. We honor our children as those who are to come after us. And I have been taught that Indigenous people never walk alone because we're always walking with our ancestors who look after us and look at and see us. And we're walking as models for those children who are looking at us. And of course, we're walking with those who live with us on the earth today as friends and relatives. So we're really never walking alone. I wanted to show you this short video. Let me introduce it first. This is Chief Seattle's teachings, which makes the Indigenous relationship with the creation and the creator very clear. This was put together when Governor Stevens first arrived in Seattle and told the native residents that he had been appointed the Commissioner of Indian Affairs for Washington Territory. They gave a demonstrative reception, that is, in front of Dr. Maynard's office near the waterfront on Main Street. But the bay was swarming with canoes, and the shore was lined with a living mass of swaying, dancing humanity until old Chief Seattle's voice rolled over the multitude, and it was like a drum, and people became very quiet and they wanted to hear. There are multiple translations of this one, but this one contains, I believe, the most consistent.
How can you buy the sky? How can you own the rain and the wind? My mother told me, every part of this earth is sacred to our people. Every pine needle, every sandy shore, every mist in the dark woods, every meadow and humming insect are all holy in the memory of our people. My father said to me, I know the sap that courses through the trees, as I know the blood that flows in my veins. We are part of the earth, and it is part of us. The perfumed flowers are our sisters. The bear, the deer, the great eagle, these are our brothers. The voice of my ancestors said to me, the shining water that moves in the streams and rivers is not simply water, but the blood of your grandfather's grandfather. Each ghostly reflection in the clear waters of the lakes tells us memories in the life of our people. The waters murmur in the voice of your great-great-grandmother. The rivers are our brothers. They quench our thirst. You must give to the rivers the kindness you would give to any brother. The voice of my grandfather said to me, the air is precious. It shares its spirits with all the life it supports. The wind that gave me my first breath also received my last sigh. Will there be any spirit of my people left? My ancestors said to me, the earth does not belong to us. We belong to the earth. The voice of my grandmother said to me, teach your children what you have been taught. What befalls the earth befalls all the sons and daughters of the earth. Hear my voice and the voice of my ancestors. The destiny of your people is a mystery to us. When the view of the ripe hills is blotted by talking wires, where will the thicket be? Gone? Where will the eagle be? Gone. This we know. All things are connected like the blood that unites us. We did not weave the web of life. We are merely a strand in it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. If we sell you our land, care for it as we have cared for it. Hold in your mind the memory of the land as it is when you receive it. Preserve the land in the air and the rivers of your children's children, and love it as we have loved it.
The point I'm hoping to make as we go through this is that our theology is land-based. The land is sacred. We are part of the land. And our connection with the land, as I mentioned, is more than simply farming it or growing things on it. It is worshipful, it is holy, and it is essential for us to have a balanced and harmonious relationship with the land, with the earth itself. And that which is evil is that which destroys balance and beauty. So it's a very different worldview that we're going to be able to address in an admittedly a somewhat superficial manner tonight. But the land, the destruction of the land and the taking of the land by the colonizers caused us damage that is registered today genetically. It didn't just cause changes then, it causes changes that we still feel today. And Indigenous people feel pain if they honor their traditions when they see the land misused, when they see the water misused, when they see anything in nature that is being destroyed or abused or treated badly. It's really doing that to our Creator in our worldview. So if we were to look at some of the values, the differences, this is how the two world views operate. And this is how you can see that, well, during the doctrine of discovery, when the land was being taken away, when the Pope declared through the papal bulls that our people were not even considered human, we were considered flora and fauna because we were not Christians. We were considered not civilized. Obviously, that was woefully incorrect. But here is how some of the social values differ today. So the indigenous values on the left show value for people as individuals, but more for the community as a whole. We show respect for elders, believing that our elders have lived many more years, and those years are how they acquire wisdom through life itself. We believe in sharing that which we have with others. We honor humility and practice it. We honor the past. We don't just study it, we honor it. We emphasize the great mystery of understanding of how our lives were given to us, how the earth was given to us, how the water was created, but we see it as a great mystery. We try to live in harmony with nature because we are part of nature. We live in community and we practice cooperation and collaboration. Majority culture values, whether it is this land or other lands, are those which value a person's possessions, idealize youthfulness, emphasize private ownership of goods, compete for profit, emphasize planning for the future, emphasize the scientific method and hypothesis testing, show that we are here to dominate nature rather than to live with it. And we tend in the majority culture to value individualism and independence as opposed to community and interdependence. I mentioned the elder to you in Alaska who said that she didn't think it was a big deal when the missionaries came because they already had Jesus. Well, she made reference to their values, and I just wanted to show you that in Minto Flats, this is a small village that you can drive to from Fairbanks. It's about 80 miles. And the people still practice their traditional ways today. Their values would be summarized in this box, that every Athabascan is responsible to all other Athabascans for survival of culture, of values and traditions. So that same commitment from thousands of years ago, and the Alaska natives have been on their land 10,000 years. That commitment is still alive today. If you go into the villages, you will see these values posted in most of the homes, at least most of the homes we've been in, and also in the schoolrooms in each classroom. Here are the values in a little bit more detail. Knowledge of language valued, respect for others, respect for nature, love for children, knowledge of one's family tree, humor, being a good hunter to provide for one's family, showing humility, showing responsibility to the tribe, to the village, to the community, sharing what one has showing respect for elders, avoiding conflict, showing hard work, practicing one's spirituality, practicing the family roles in the sense that if something happens to a family that causes a child not to have a home, someone else will take the child in. There are no children that are homeless in the Alaskan Athabascan villages that we have visited, because an auntie comes forward, a grandmother comes forward, a brother or sister. All children have homes and they're valued. So the Athabascan people say it's our responsibility to teach these values to our children. And these were adopted by the elders at their conference in 1985 as a summary of their heritage. Our understanding of our universe and our place in it is belief in God, or creator, as we would say, and respect for all of the creation. Being Indigenous and Christian. Well, I should declare my own story in the sense that I grew up both Native and Christian. My grandmother lived with us for many years, and she was part of the group that was proselytized by the Methodist missionaries. The Blackfeet were heavily proselytized by the Methodist Christians and later on by Catholics. But here is the thing that she said to us, and it's like the point I was making with the previous slide. The values that we learn as Christians are the values that our Creator gave us before Jesus came along. Given that the Alaskans were on the land for 10,000 years, we know from some of the most recent studies that there is evidence in the Southwest that goes back 30,000 years. The Alaskans and the New Zealanders were on their land practicing these values 65,000 years ago. So for many of our people, Jesus is a newcomer, but Jesus, the values fit what we were already doing. And you can look at some of these things. Creation-based Indigenous theology emphasizes place over time. As I said, the land is extremely important to us, where we were brought up. For the Chumash people, it would be the ocean is very, 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 very important in the culture and in the history. For the Blackfeet, there's no ocean. For us, it's the land and the mountains and the people of the plains and the animals of the plains. We're not redemption-based as modern religion. Most of our languages do not have a word for sin. We emphasize instead the importance of harmony, balance, and cooperation. We do not emphasize conquest or rule over nature. We practice monotheism, one God. Now, today, Trinitarianism has taken the place of the only one God, but those of us who are Christian, we tend to view Jesus as a brother, an older brother. And we would emphasize the relational Trinity. In other words, the Trinity representing what all of us should be doing is being in a family together. We believe that truth comes from observing how others have lived, not so much how others have believed. We have sacred stories to carry our knowledge. They are oral tradition, as opposed to being written down, for example, in the Bible. We don't have a lot of literature, but we have many, many sacred stories that tell us about how things were created and how they are lived and what our values are. Our theology is experience-based. Our worship is through ceremony and through traditions, through dance, through music, through storytelling. In many of our churches today, our liturgy may be completely unrelated to our experience because we learn a worship style that doesn't really have much to do with us, with how we live during the week. But that's not the case for the Native people. The day can begin with prayer, no matter where you are. I drive 55 miles from my home to my workplace, and I refer to my prayers as the cathedral of the car, because I'm saying my prayers for people while I'm driving to my workplace and when I'm on my way home. We have a circular worldview based upon the what is called the medicine wheel, or the 4 directions. We base our practices in kinship, and it's not hierarchical leadership. Even the position of chief in some of our indigenous nations was a position that changed periodically. People would be elected to be the chief, or come from kinship relationships. We believe in relationship, a holistic view of the earth. It's not a power-based, dualistic, abstract governmental position. It's one that is born of the people and acted out through the people. And we believe that all creation has life or soul, panentheism. Individuals in the Western religion are the ones with soul, and human beings are qualitatively different from the animals or the plants or the trees or the water. The indigenous concept of harmony and balance is compatible with the biblical concept of shalom, or harmony. So we would see Jesus, if we're Christians, we would see Jesus as an indigenous healer who provided this shalom, or harmony. Healing is for God's sacred creation, all of it. So how can we move together, working together within our differences? Well, I'm going to show you a short video that is a commentary on something called two-eyed seeing. And this comes from the scientists working with Indigenous people in Nova Scotia at Cape Breton University. This method of seeing was innovative in science education to promote the value of Indigenous ways of doing science as a complement to the scientific method. I submit that it can be used similarly in program design for Indigenous theological education. I think I might have to apologize. I might have accidentally, yes, I think I accidentally erased that little video that I wanted you to see. But here is how, let me go back to two-eyed seeing. Here's how two-eyed seeing works. We look for understanding in 2 traditions, or in the case of science, we look for how Indigenous people learn science through experience. So we would learn botany through growing things, observing the plants, observing the fields, and basically experiencing science. We recognize the value of that. Today, we also recognize the value that when we do have science that can explain to us through genetic studies, perhaps how to grow corn that is better for us, then we can see that both the indigenous tradition would have value and also the science approach would have value. So the idea is to look out of our two eyes for value in both traditions and for commonality in both traditions, so that we can derive value of learning in both traditions, from our indigenous ways of knowing and also from the Western way of knowing. And so this is what is referred to as two-eyed seeing. And two-eyed seeing, I think, is a way that we can look together theologically without having to choose one over the other, and without having to say, oh, we have to line them up syncretically to force them to be together, rather than saying, no, we look at both theologies if we're comparing two or more, and we look for the value in all of them. And that's where the harmony comes. So how do indigenous people follow Jesus then without having to follow the culture that came with it from Europe? A culture that did not understand our lived experience of connectedness to nature. The colonizers did not understand the holistic spirit of the people who were following Creator God for thousands of years before Jesus walked on the earth. Well, one way is looking at our stories. The stories of the people of Israel are to be respected, but they do not replace the tribal narratives for indigenous Christians. For example, every indigenous nation has its own creation story and its own heroes and tricksters. The Blackfeet have a story that has been called a Christ story by some. The story is called Scarface, and there are many variations on the original, and Scarface is also called Starboy. But the point of Scarface is that it is a story of redemption for the son of the son, S-U-N, the S-O-N of the S-U-N. And it is a story that shows how goodness can come from disability or imperfection. So in that sense, it is a story of redemption. We learn from all of our tribal stories because they're passed down from our elders. Wise people are those who know the stories. The legend of Starboy, or the Christ story of the Blackfeet, was actually the basis for an opera called Poya by Nevin, an American composer. It was actually performed in Pittsburgh in 1909 and at the Royal Opera House in Berlin in 1910. Here is a graphic that shows you the two-eyed seeing. Learning to see with one eye the strengths of indigenous knowledge and ways of knowing, and learning to see from the other eye the strengths of Western knowledge and ways of knowing, learning to use both eyes for the benefit of all. Oh, and guess what? I have my little slide my video is here. It was just a little bit out of order. So we're going to see Mi'kmaq elder Albert Marshall from the Ecosoni First Nation in Canada, the person who created the phrase of two-eyed seeing. And you'll see a little introduction and a discussion of it. It's a short video, but I think I wanted you to see it, and here it is.
That's how it started. The communities, the elders were concerned that there were not any students from their communities going into the sciences.
Two-eye seeing really is, it's and has to be your guiding principles as to how one should live while you are here on this earth.
Two-eyed seeing, as brought to us by Elder Albert Marshall, Mi'kmaq Elder Deskasoni, is recognizing that there are different ways of looking at the world, and maybe two of those ways are the Western scientific way and the Indigenous peoples or the Aboriginal peoples way. And that two-eyed seeing refers to finding the strengths in both of those, the Western and the Indigenous, and mindfully bringing those strengths together, drawing upon the deep understandings that they represent, the strengths of each, and bringing them together to work together to go forward on this planet together.
I feel that what we learned as First Nations people in your own identity, Mi'kmaq, is valuable. I also believe that the concepts being brought on by Europeans is also valuable in today's world. And you try to bring those two together and look at it through two-eyed seeing that both are very valuable and both can be achieved.
Our airs are poisoned, our rivers are poisoned, our forests are pretty much gone, and the animals are extinct even as we speak. With this two-eye seeing, we very quickly realize and see that science is not going to save the environment or the natural world, but rather a change of attitude, change of mindsets.
I see the strengths of Western science as being the ability to look at the physical world, see the patterns within it, and take those patterns apart and find the mechanisms, or try to search for the mechanisms that bring those patterns into existence. And then on the basis of that reconstructed understanding, try to improve upon our material existence often for humans on this world. I see the strengths of the Indigenous peoples, on the other hand, of also seeing the patterns in the world, but rather than taking them apart to reconstruct them, it's more of a working of patterns within patterns. In other words, a weaving of yourself and your understandings into the world in which you live. I think one of the most exciting and useful ways to teach science would be to use one of the methods from science itself, which is the compare and contrast. Why can't we educate our science students as to what the mainstream way of doing science is, and compare it and contrast with another way of doing science from an Indigenous perspective? Why can't we put them side by side and use them to help a student develop a better understanding of what mainstream science is and what other perspectives on science are? That's a scientific method, compare and contrast.
Basically, the education system has taught us to absorb every knowledge we get without actually questioning it or looking at it from another perspective.
Why do we think that we can teach by focus on the one thing when the whole of human consciousness is not a focus on one thing? It's always a back and forth, a scanning of the environment, and a compare and contrast, and a past and a future within the present.
With Mi'kmaq identity, as I was growing up, I didn't know any other identity because I was being trained in Mi'kmaq. I was trained in the language, and in the language are embedded all of your oral traditions, all your moral, and all your everyday life. Your history is involved in it, because when you went to bed at night without the competition of television, Atari, and everything else, you had stories. You had stories about your own history. You had stories about everything that it was required to make you into a better human being.
Part of the struggle of anybody, I don't think it matters who you are is to ask yourself and to learn, who am I? So if an educational system ignores part of who you think you are, simply because it doesn't include your people's understandings, as for example, if the science curricula does not include any of the understandings that Canada's Aboriginal peoples have with respect to the land that they've occupied for thousands of years, then that ability to develop a well-balanced and deep understanding of who you are as a young Aboriginal in Canada today is going to be denied.
Our journey here is not meant for one perspective or one consciousness to get us through. We all need each other. So the lessons that we are trying to put forth now is to our young people. It's going to be much more expedient if we can take the best for whatever tools the white man has brought forth and the tools what our forefathers had left us with.
This tool I've seen is valuable when you pick from the two when you pick from two worlds and try to co-join those two. I find it very difficult, but I know it has to be done. I know I can't crawl into my culture and say, oh, that's all I need to survive in this world. I also know that you need the white man's education to survive in this world and be happy. And I think the white man also needs me to what I have to offer.
We have a challenge ahead of us to bring to the attention of that educational system that the Western way of looking at things is but one way.
Paraphrasing Chief Dan George saying, we shall take the instruments of the white man, his tools and his education, and we'll incorporate them with ours so we can create a better world for everyone.
Hey, Mary,
Yes.
I would love to give you more time, but we want to have some time for questions and answers. Is this a good place to do that?
We could do that. Yes, I think we've covered most of well, we had some more, but this will be good. I was thinking we had until 8:30, but okay.
No, we usually have question and answers until
Okay.
8:30, so
Oh, all right. Okay, I misunderstood that. All
my
right,
apologies. That's my fault.
that's okay. Let us stop here then. I'll stop the share.
That would be great.
Okay. All right.
So, but what you were sharing was impressive and enjoyable. So, I have an interesting question. I want to leave that to the end, if that's okay, Casey. I will not ignore that. I have somebody who put a question in towards for me, and that I want to ask you towards the end, Mary.
Okay.
Okay. So
Real quick survey.
yes, do a quick survey, Tim. Put that out there. And I do.
I don't see a hand raiser thing.
Okay, I'm going to give you a question, and Tim's going to put a survey in the chat that you click on,
Sure.
and then he already put it out there for everybody. It's a direct message to me, honey. You need to put it to everybody.
Done.
He's done that before. So if you'll click on that, you can go to your website, you can hold on to it and do it later, or you can do it now. But I can already see that this is a conversation we're going to need to revisit in the future again. I have no doubt about that. So first of all, I need to ask a question because you mentioned it at the very beginning, and I think this is important to the conversation and goes to, you talked about many things, but I guess that most of us didn't know what relocation days were.
Oh, okay. So relocation days took place in the early 1950s, and that was an attempt by the federal government in the United States to relocate Native people off the reservation because the reservations were expensive to run and they were a failure. It didn't occur, however, that they could give the land back and we could kind of start over that way because the land had already been given away. But the idea was promises were made to people that if they relocated to a city, and some of the most popular cities that had been suggested to them, Los Angeles was one of them. You may or may not know there are over 275,000 indigenous people self-identified in LA County, not including San Bernardino County, not including counties north of LA County. It's a huge population of indigenous people who were told if they went there or to Seattle or to Minneapolis, they would be taken care of. There would be food for them, there would be jobs, and there would be housing. That wasn't the case. And, you know, it never has been the case. Promises were made, but not honored. So during relocation days, that refers to people leaving the reservation where they had been confined to try to find a new place in the city.
Thank you. That just, it feels like a lot of this conversation, and that was the private conversation that I had with somebody during this, goes to the wrongs that we have done, that have been done to Native Americans and indigenous people. And we're looking at the US, Canada tonight, but this has been an international issue.
Yeah, it's a global issue. Yes.
It's a global issue. And saying that, I'm going to go to the last thing first that this person talked about. You know, we know the horrible things that came out in the news in the last year and a half with the burials of mass graves of children. Yeah, of children. We know of languages being tried, being ripped away, and children being placed in boarding schools, children being ripped away from their families. Yes. Even currently, children being taken from their parents and given to families off of reservation in the name of saving that child.
Yes.
So the person asks, and I know the Episcopal Church did this in 2612, but why is it that it's taken us so long to repent of these things? Why is the Episcopal Church one of the only denominations to do this? And let me forward that with the idea of how long did it take the Southern Baptists to admit that there was a wrong in what they've done? With, you know, looking at the slavery and the Black people. So historically, Christians have a problem.
Well, there's plenty of sin to go around. The Episcopalians held slaves as well.
Yeah, I know that. So yeah, but the whole picture is, why does it take, why is it that we don't recognize this, and Native Americans don't call it a sin, right? It's a wrong, it's an unbalance. Why does it take us so long to recognize these things and try to rectify? And why do we not try to rectify? That's a complicated question.
Well, I mean, it's far more complex than we can address today. It deals with what is evil? What is the nature of evil? You know, where does that come from? How do we deal with it? And in the case of the evil that was visited upon the indigenous people around the world, and certainly not just in the North American, it came from the papal bulls back in the 1400s that it was okay to take land that was unoccupied. It's called terra nullius. It was unoccupied land. And the way that the land was justified, the taking of the land was justified because the people the explorers, the colonizers, did not perceive civilization. And they did not see anything that resembled Christianity. So it was that sin of taking the land away rests with the Christian churches going back into Europe with the papal bulls. And what is the nature of evil is really what causes us to visit evil today upon other countries, upon poor people. I mean, that's beyond something that we can address tonight. But I think that is the foundational line of inquiry, is what is the nature of evil and what is the payoff for doing evil. It's
temporary. So, and sorry to put you on the spot, Reverend.
I'm used to being put on the spot.
You and Mike. So
it took me 4 years to get permission to build our building that we're building for 50 homeless families. But if you're, Indians don't give up. I mean, we just keep on going. So
you keep going. So saying that, let me give Julie a chance. Would you like to respond to any of that, Julie, at this time, or is that putting you on the spot?
No, that's fine. I'm okay. Mary, thank you. It's so thorough and what you presented, and I appreciate that. You mentioned just a minute ago the word poor. I grew up in a very poor family, but in retrospect, we were comparing ourselves to what other people had and what we did not. But in reality, we were living in our homeland, renting, of course, because our land was taken away. But we were so rich in knowing later on that we were playing and living in our indigenous land. We were eating indigenous foods. We weren't hearing the language of, this is sacred. You need to remember this. This is important. This is what we've always been doing. My father wasn't given that instruction from his father. His mother our grandmother was very damaged. She was not full blood. She was illegitimate. She didn't want to touch the culture with a 10-foot pole. When you wanted to ask her questions, she'd pinch you and say, don't be asking those stupid questions. My grandfather and his father, my great grandfather, where we get our namesake, Tumamayat, from, were very involved in the culture in many ways, but it was not that language that they used to say, these are sacred lands. This is how we've always been doing it. Don't forget it. No, my father, and when we talked about language, the Spanish that was spoken in the household, his father told him as they were speaking the native language, who are you going to teach it to? It's going. No one's speaking it anymore. Why would you want to continue? And then my father with the Spanish didn't want us to have an accent, because a Spanish accent. So, he wanted us to be a little bit better. He'd have to change his indigenous name to a Spanish surname to get work and to make his way in the world around here. So, we were poor in material culture, but we were rich in our indigenous cultures. I think what's missing in all of this is that if we were to eliminate any organized religions and worked within our indigenous spirituality, which in effect, the storytelling, all those people demonized our cultures around the world. Hitler did with all of the Germanic. Freya, our goddess of spring, became the Wicked Witch. with her familiar as the black cat on the broom in the black cloak. You know, they all were demonized. Our sacred sites, Mount Diablo, North Dakota, sacred Spirit Lake became Devil's Lake. So we weren't meant to recognize our indigenous land. We were meant to not feel, we never owned land, as we all know, but we honored it. Here in our valley, we have brought back over the last 30 years the reciprocity to our land. As I said in my little chat there, that we have people have forgotten how to do the reciprocity to the earth. The earth is going, where have you been? As we started doing ceremony here to in the full moon, new moon, solstice, equinoxes, where have you been for the last 200 years? Where are our gifts? Where are our songs? Where are our, recognition? So if people were to do that, see, if you put sacredness on material things, then you have to make up for it in some way. But no, you demonize them, you capitalize them, you rip them out from the indigenous people so they can't say that that's sacred. So you can't drill, you can't plant, you can't destroy or cut down the mountaintops because of capitalism. So, it's all money based. So as indigenous peoples, we want to come back, and want to come back, I can only speak personally, is to have people recognize that we are still indigenous. We were all indigenous at one time with our cultures, with our reciprocity to the earth. There's no reason why people who come to America, bringing their indigenous plants, bringing a little bit of their indigenous teachings and ways to now they want to start, but I don't want them to be Native American. I don't want them to be us. I want them to learn who they are. I am not, there are no full-blood Chumash people anymore. There are very few. I am one of the few families that have at least a half Native American blood with running through my veins. But in that vein is also Greek, Italian, Iberian Peninsula, British Isles, North Africa. So my teachings and bringing, you mentioned something about the children, and it made me think about Melodoma Some in South Africa and Dagara Nation. A child never touched the ground for the 2 years of his life because all his aunties or all her aunties carried them no matter where they were within the group, within the village. Ceremonies went on for weeks to allow people to come say goodbye to their deceased relative. We have lost that ability to slow down in this world because of, again, capitalism. Get it going, get it going. We got to get this, we got to get that. So to walk in this place of recognizing that the earth doesn't slow down, we're the ones trying to speed it up. And in that place, we're making animals, plants, and the world extinct. And where would we be? I'm not going to Mars. I don't know about the rest of you, but put that money that these people are billionaires to bring it back to the earth. So where's the solutions? And that's what we need to talk about is, we can have our spirituality and we can honor and be true. I never tell people that they should do this or that. Spirituality and religion is personal to me. I have a lot of people ask me, "Oh, are you Catholic? What religion are you?" I said, "I'm a heathen." No, I love all religions because if we look at religion and we look at individuality, we look at indigenous, all those what we have demonized stories and storytelling into myth, fairy tale, and lore, it dismisses them. It dismisses them as teachings and how to behave in this world. So if we look at indigenous teachings around the world, it is telling us how to behave at a time when the animals were people. And those repetitive stories teach us from our childhood to our adulthood as we go through those stages of life. And if we don't listen to them, or if we did listen to them, the world would be right. So as we don't listen to them, we allow ourselves to do the things that you refer to as evil, and they are. As my great grandfather was translating some of the words from Poli, who was a European that came in to our region. The man Poli tells my great grandfather, he spoke 7 languages. He says, "You tell your people that all the land they see is my land." And so my grandfather did, but in such a way that everybody hated Poli after that. And my great grandfather says, "Yes, but except for the coastline here. What you see there in Ventura is our land. We were promised that by the church." But of course, the document was filed and, we didn't get that. So we are subjected to subservience to people that we had to make our living as being lent out. So, I'm going to stop here, but again, it's a story that's repetitive around the world, as you said, Mary, and is so well documented. So until people can understand that the sanctity of the land and the earth is all we have, and as humans, we've got to step in line and remember that.
Thank you, Julie. And I'm glad you didn't dismiss faith, denominations, religion altogether. So
No.
because
Mhm.
at the root, and that here we try to bring understanding and dialogue to build understanding and to help people grow. And so I asked this question, and Mike, I haven't forgotten you over there, so hang on. So somebody asked, how can we incorporate Indigenous theology into our worship services? And, you talked about, Julie talked about the Chumash. Mary, you've talked about many ways. I go back to, many of us are reaching into our Celtic roots now.
Mhm.
How do we, how do you do this, not just in the Episcopal Church, but how do you see it for all kinds of faiths that we can introduce Indigenous theology into our beliefs?
Well, I think by did you mean, I heard, how do we introduce it into our worship service? That's a different
Yeah.
question from how do we show respect for it theologically. But I think the first thing is get to know it. I was trying to show that in a very quick way tonight because of our time constraints, but the theology that we have is actually not incompatible with the teachings of Jesus if you happen to be Christian. I don't find it incompatible because if you really look at what Jesus said, he said, take care of all the people on the margins, take care of the earth, take care of those who suffer, and so on. So I don't think it has to be Christianity that does it, but it seems to me the first step would be to find out what do the Indigenous theology, what are the commonalities? Because we were over 500 nations in the continental US, represented over 500 nations before colonization. So it's not good manners. In fact, it's really poor manners if I were to speak for another tribal religion or another tribal theology. But we do have things in common, and that's what I was trying to show tonight. So the first step is get to know what those are. Generosity, for example, being willing to sacrifice for the community, respect for the elders, not just help them get across the street, but real respect. Listen to the stories, listen to the teachings, listen to what our elders are trying to share with us that they've learned over experience. That's a core belief for us. Respect for the children. All of those kinds of things are communitarian, if you will, more than individualism. That's probably the biggest thing. And then above all, the land. The respect for Mother Earth, that is core. So how would we integrate that? Well, I mean, it's becoming more and more popular to look at eco-theology, to look at the Christians are talking about eco-theology. So other faith traditions are beginning to look at the earth as maybe not Gaia, maybe Gaia, depending upon which faith tradition it is, but to look at the responsibility that we have as opposed to the permission to dominate the earth. I mean, I think we could make a huge difference if all of the various faith traditions really looked at care for the earth as core as the core basis for what we're doing. If all of us really looked at that, no matter what our faith tradition is, we could make a difference, and it might save the earth.
Thank you. Yeah, our mother is known as Hutash, Julie said. So I take that in understanding, and part of this interfaith idea, and some people have said interfaith could be the world's salvation, if we worked at it hard enough. When I had the opportunity to live with James in India, I brought back ideas of, I really don't like to kill most insects anymore, you know, be very protective. So we pick up when we take the opportunity to learn and be with, then we learn and we also show example. And that's what you're saying. And I appreciate that. And I think everybody here also does. Mike, I want to give you an opportunity. I just, you know, you weren't here last time.
Yeah. Sorry about not being here last time. Thank you. I love the presentation. I particularly love the appeal to the idea of shalom, which in Hebrew means more than peace. It comes from the root for wholeness. I love this concept of all things being connected. I would say that's the central insight of Jewish mysticism. It seemed to me, listening, you know, to the summary, that the essence of what you're speaking about is a deep environmentalism, which I think is entirely compatible with Judaism. In fact, again, you know, there's always the issue of how you translate, but in one translation in Genesis, it's not to dominate the earth, but to guard the earth, as I think a better translation of the Hebrew. What I'm particularly interested in, because I'm so interested in theology, is you have the native peoples and you're Episcopal. So is the Episcopal approach to native peoples like an Episcopal approach to French people or Spanish people or Italian people? It's just a different people? Or is there a specific native people's theology? And, you know, I always wonder and even worry about the conflict, you know. So is the Great Spirit the creator? Is Jesus God? Is the idea of Jesus being God compatible with native theology? And just here's another kicker. If the earth is sacred, well, the earth has only been around for a few billion years. Does that mean that the Great Spirit didn't exist before the earth cooled? And the sun will explode? I'm a physicist, by the way, in my first career. The sun will explode in a few billion years. It'll go to become a red dwarf, and there won't be any earth any longer. So will the Great Spirit disappear with the earth? Is the Great Spirit tied to this planet? Is it tied to all of nature? You know, is respect, Terry, you don't want to kill insects. Do you want to kill COVID viruses? Or should they be preserved also?
And we don't want to go to the insect thing because, but
I'm just curious about, I mean,
see
it would
why I
never
didn't
occur
unleash
to me
him on
that there
you?
are Episcopal
No,
priests who embrace Native American theology.
You
So
see
I'm
why
just-
he's dear to our heart, but yes, go.
well, I mean, he's my brother, you know, he's people of the book.
So my question
know.
is Jesus your brother or is Jesus God?
So for me,
Oh.
as a professing Christian, Jesus is God. For
And
me,
would that be the equivalent to the Great Spirit? Is the Great Spirit the Father, Son, or Holy Spirit? Or do you worry about that?
I don't really worry about it, but I will refer you the very next thing I was going to introduce you to was Stephen Charleston. And Stephen Charleston, if you haven't read any of his materials, you should, because he is a bishop in the Episcopal Church who is also native and is very articulate and is, I think, beginning to unfold he's retired. He was a seminary dean. He was a bishop in Alaska. He's beginning to articulate his take on the theology that makes use of the two-eyed seeing. For me, I really honestly don't worry that much about, I don't really think that much about how God is carved up, how the Great Spirit is carved up, because we have different creation stories in so many of our nations. The creation story for the Navajo people is based on corn woman.
Mhm.
The creation story for some of the Pacific Northwest tribal people is based on the raven. For the Blackfeet, it's based on the sun.
So if belief in that story is incompatible with Genesis, does the Episcopal Church worry about that?
Well, I wouldn't presume to speak for the entire Episcopal Church.
You do right now.
If any- yeah, but I'm not that stupid. I mean, let's don't. I'm not going to go back into that corner. I'm a priest of 12 years, talking with a group of people in Ventura, California. So what I think we have to figure is this: what is the holistic approach? That's really the most native. What's the big picture? In other words, do I want to split hairs over whether Jesus was really, the Son of God, or is Jesus my older brother who is sacred in his teachings? Or do I really want to spend my time saying, what was Jesus teaching that causes us to want to know those lessons 2,000 years later? What
And
was
that makes perfect sense to me, but I imagine it would make many Christians uncomfortable.
Well, I guarantee it would make many Christians uncomfortable, but it's not, see, in the same way that I'm not presuming to speak for all of Christianity or for any other denomination, or even for all of the Episcopal Church. That would make me very uncomfortable if someone thought that. What I'm speaking is a relatively new priest in the Episcopal Church who is also native. And what I'm trying to represent is, and Stephen Charleston does this too, you can hold both of them in tension. You can hold both of them as true. It's like the blind man and the elephant, the story of the blind man and the elephant. Which part of it do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I use that image all the time.
And then we can parse it, then we can make sense of it from our experiences. But we don't have to agree on all the pieces, because we're looking at it from different experiences. We're looking at different pieces of the elephant. And so I think the main thing that makes an interfaith group valuable and critical even is that we are trying to all look at the different pieces.
Yes, absolutely.
Share our perceptions. And so, I don't, that, for better or worse, that's kind of how I make sense of it.
Well, thank you, Mary. Didn't mean to put you on the hot seat there, but
If you're a clergy person, you're used to sitting on the hot seat. I'm not even really warmed up yet, and I'll bet the rabbi isn't either. We could go the rest of the night on this, because this is what we're called to do. This is what
and he loves
I just
it.
wanted
But
to
wait,
say
wait,
one
wait.
thing.
Okay, Larry, because there's two people
Just wanted
here.
to say
Go ahead.
one thing about what Mary had just said. Fundamental to Anglican theology is our ability to tolerate difference of opinion.
Exactly.
Because we are founded upon a commonality of worship, not a commonality of belief. And that's been fundamental to our history and theology for the last 400 years.
Yeah. That's why Tim and I became Episcopalian, or at least why, yeah. So Papa, I don't know who had their hand up first, Stephen or Papa. So Papa, you're muted, by the way.
Thank you, Terry. Reverend Crist, I too enjoyed your presentation, especially the comparisons you made between native beliefs and white man's beliefs. My question is a very simple historical one, and excuse my ignorance. Was there a history of conflict in Native America between the tribes before European man came here? In other words, you've presented a picture of a very idyllic worldview, one that respects nature, that strives for harmony with nature. But among the tribes in America, was there a history of warfare or conflict? Because where there is conflict, there is evil. Where there is conflict, there is sin.
I think that the answer to that would be, for contemporary thinkers, those of us who are here tonight, I think you can trace, trying to think of an example that doesn't trace back to some form of colonialism. I would say that there was originally fighting over food. There could have been fighting over food because of drought, because of things that happen naturally when people didn't have food. The fighting that's in my own people, it's all traceable back to colonialism. The fighting among the Blackfeet was over the horses when they came in. It was over fur trading when that came from Canada. I can't think of anything that we were really fighting over for the Blackfeet history. I can't think of anything we were fighting over that doesn't trace back to intervention from outsiders.
Hmm.
But
Interesting.
I certainly think it's reasonable to assume, and I don't think I would call it evil. If people are fighting over food source, is that evil? I'm not so sure. That, I mean, that's survival. So if two tribes fought because there wasn't food, would it be evil that they didn't share it? Well, you could make a scenario, we're down to the last stalk of corn. You know, I've got your family and I've got my family. Are we free from sin enough to break the last stalk in half and share it? Don't know about that. Probably not so. That wouldn't ascribe perfection to people. It's certainly not biblical. Is it in other, well, in non-monotheistic, see, that's a whole other approach. A non-monotheistic look at evil is a whole different ball of wax. And so I'm thinking that I can really only speak fairly for my own people. I can't think of any examples of fighting with other tribal people that doesn't trace back to some possession or some money or some goodie that was being brought in. They fought over alcohol, for example. I mean, once alcohol was introduced.
Wow.
So it's a good question for thought, and probably a good seminar. Could do a whole seminar on that, actually.
So I'm not going to
Can I add
inject
to that?
anything. Wait, you want to add to that briefly
Just-
because
just
Stephen's
briefly.
waiting. Yeah.
Okay, we have an elder, Fernando Librado. Quetzalcoatl was his native name. He has been quoted many, many times. Our culture is based on less than a dozen people after colonization. Their memories were sparse. I forgot. But there's a saying, he says, that if you have only one acorn and you give it to somebody who's in need, and there's other stories that talk about greed, but some people would say to you, "Oh, what a fool. What are you doing?" And then other people would say, "Wow, that is like really great. You are honored for that. You know, all you had was that, yet you gave it away." So it's again a consciousness and with survival or breaking of taboos. Adultery was punishable by death. They always took it out on the women. Well, it takes two to tango, right? But there was a special day in the winter solstice where promiscuity was allowed in those last 5 days of the year here in our territory. So everybody has, again, going back to their stories, was not considered evil. I don't know. You know, that word doesn't even appear in
It
any
doesn't.
of our stories.
And
That's
see, the other
interesting.
thing that comes into play with us is in our stories, we have stories of the trickster. The
Yeah.
trickster is a character who does things that are not always good, but are they evil? I mean, it's just it's a character, it's a character who carries, perhaps one would say, the human propensity to do stupid things and maybe even selfish things or harmful things at a point in time. But Yeah, we really like, for example, the Blackfeet, when you deal with issues of homosexuality in many of our tribal people, I won't say all because I know of some exceptions, but I know in most of our tribal people, the people who were gay were considered to be holy, maybe a little holier in that they had a different perspective on life. In the Blackfeet, there that we have the women women who did men's work were called manly hearted women. And then we had men who stayed at home and helped do quote unquote the work of women when the other men were off hunting or fighting or whatever they were doing to protect the people. So we had a way of incorporating into the whole all of our people. I'm thinking of a story when we were in Minto, Alaska, the first trip. We were there in this little village, and one of the elders, I noticed there was a young man dancing with the men in the circle dancing, and he looked to me like he had probably fetal alcohol syndrome. And I asked one of the women if there was anything unusual about him, and she said, no. She said, in our villages, everybody has a place. And he has a place here too. And I said, tell me about him. She said, his job is to care for the elders. When they get sick, he goes and makes the tea for them and cares for them. And he stays with them until they get well or until a family member can come. And that is his job. And I thought it was such a beautiful illustration of the caring for that the whole of the community, the whole of the family, the whole of the people. And is there evil in that? Well, probably somewhere, maybe, I don't know. I haven't really spent a lot of time looking at the nature of evil in tribal people. But I really can't think of any in my own tribal tradition that don't relate back to some form of colonialism, some history.
I'm going to take us from that very thorough answering, very thorough, to Stephen's question. Did you remember it, Stephen?
Yeah, well, actually, I had both my original question and also something I thought of while I was waiting. I'll with the second one because that's sort of what the topic we're on right now. You were talking about things that didn't begin, that as far as you can think of are exclusively the result of colonialism. So prior to the start of colonialism, which was only about 500 years ago, were there no wars and so forth, or do you just not know the history that far back and you're speaking just during recent centuries?
No, I think the fighting was over food. It goes back, to the cave people. Yeah. It was always over food. It was over safety issues. It was over very basic issues, food, clothing. People get sick, don't come around. I mean, I think but I wouldn't call that evil myself. I would ascribe evilness to intentional destructive behavior to harm other people. I think if you're fighting for food, I'm going to come down on the moral position that if I'm fighting for food to feed my baby, I'm going to be justified with that. Yeah. So that's my personal position morally. It's going to be, if I have to fight to save my grandmother, I'm gonna do that. That's my moral position. But is that evil? I don't think so, because I'm fighting for the greater good of another person's life.
Right.
So I think there was conflict, but I don't know that, I can't think of anything in our tradition that I would call evil.
Yeah.
In that
I wanted to add to that, Mary, that I do archaeological work, and some of my very first, I've been at this about 40 years, and I see in some of our cemeteries, whether they be an isolated individuals, a small group of people, or over 100 people, because of development. We in California, we have laws that mitigate cultural resources along with natural resources, all those. There has been a couple, 2 or 3 incidences where we found that a person had been murdered and a child had been murdered as a crushed skull, a blade point in the middle of the abdomen, a couple people with blade points in their abdomen regions. So we see the physical evidence of conflict. What the incidences were, we will never know.
Right.
But we do see that, and where there was definitely, we see people who I can physically see, those aren't us. I mean, the average height of a woman is me, like less than 5 feet. The average man was like maybe 5'4", 5'5". Then we see somebody who's like long bone weight. That's not us. So why were they killed? And, you know, so again, these are things with our culture, the ethnographic history pre-mission has really been eliminated. People, you know, again, during the colonization, there was one chief, a woman from Santa Cruz Island, who the prophecy that she would become the chief of the Wot of all, because we have a matrilineal society. She became the Wot, the Neki Wot of all the islands, but then she was transferred by the missions to the mainland and taken over onto the mainland. In her words, this isn't that long ago, probably less than 200 years ago, that she's telling people, don't go over there, and meaning across the river over to San Buenaventura Mission, because they are trying to make you forget who you are. So within that and within our group, we have lost a huge percentage of our most intimate women, no basketry songs, no gathering songs, no women's part, because they were all men doing our ethnographic history. So a lot of this stuff has just been gone forever. So we'll never really know the answers to those conflicts. But again, survival was the most. Here in California, we have droughts that are crazy. We're in one right now, and they repeat themselves every 2, 5, and 1,000 years. So we're in probably the biggest one we've ever been in. So yes, you are going to move from your mountainous villages down to the ocean, because at least there's food in the ocean. But this time we're facing right now, there may not even be food in there if we don't learn from history.
Yes. So, Stephen, I'm going to break. We have lasted a lot longer than we normally do. No, you don't need to be sorry. I love the comments you've been putting in there, Julie, and people. I hope you can read the chat and see Julie's comments. And then I'm going to bow to Rabbi Blotker, because he had one thing he said he could do briefly. You're muted, Mike.
When you were speaking about two-eyed seeing, as my friends here know, I was a physicist before I was a rabbi. And it struck me that the physics of two-eyed seeing is very interesting, and I think spiritually enlightening. We who have two eyes see, and when we use both eyes to focus on the same thing, we open up a third dimension. You can't see 3 dimensions with one eye. On the other hand, if the eyes don't focus on the same thing, we have a great difficulty in making sense of the world. So if our eyes see different things, and I understand the imagery of sort of Western knowledge and native knowledge existing, and I often talk as a physicist, you know, about quantum mechanics and light being a particle and light being a wave, and accepting both. But I love this image, which is where I thought you were going with two-eyed seeing, that if the eyes work together, we literally open up another dimension. But if the eyes don't work together, then we actually obliterate our ability to be in the world. So I just thought I would add that as the physics side of two-eyed seeing.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I think, Mary, unless you have something else to say, I think that's a great place to leave this. And
I just wanted to say that I thank you for the invitation. It's an ambitious, even perhaps a stupid attempt to cover a lot of ground in an hour and a half, but I wanted you to at least hear some terms that you could follow up with on your own. And I appreciate the invitation very much.
it was not stupid, and I really appreciate the presentation. And Sally wants to say something.
This has been a great evening to see how everybody learns from Mary's presentation and hears the different observations. And one of the things that I was thinking was, first I wanted to hold up Stephen Charleston's book.
Yes, that was my
go.
very next part of this presentation. Because it integrates the native theology with Christianity through the vision quest.
Right.
That
So-
was, yeah.
So
Can you
I
put
left.
that title in the chat?
I did put the
You did,
title in the
yes.
chat.
Oh, it's in there. Okay,
Good.
thank
Okay, this is what it looks like, and you can purchase it.
you. Mhm.
The just other two things were, I think one thing somebody asked Mr. Payman, he asked about warring, and Stephen asked about the warring. I don't see the indigenous people as trying to dominate. You know, they weren't about dominating culture or dominating the world the way Western civilization and capitalism is. That was one thing I wanted to bring up. And the other thing was when Mary was talking about the earth is, the whole point of the indigenous vision is stewardship of the earth. You know, it's all about being a steward, not just raping and pillaging and producing and monetizing everything. So that were my only things I wanted to add that I silent on. So thank you for letting me say something.
Sure. If I could make a quick response to that, it's even more than stewardship. We are part of it. We're not just husbandry, animal, we're in it with everyone else who's living. And, so do we care for the animals? Yes, but we are with the animals.
It's self-care as well.
It's one more piece. Yeah. I told somebody, we're not the spider weaving the web. We're a thread in the web.
Yeah, you said that at the beginning of it. Yes, it's very true. Survey again. Did you want to post it again? And if you need to, you can save the chat. You go down to the bottom and you can.
I'd like to save the chat because I couldn't watch the chat. So
I save chats all the time, but
yeah, good.
there's a survey. Mary and Julie and Sally and everybody who's participated, a big thank you. Mary, again, huge presentation. I can see why it can take you hours to do this. And everybody, please welcome back when we do this again. If you would like to be on our email, that's part of the survey. If you haven't been, Julie, we'd love to see you return, and Sally and Miss Guzman and Casey back there. So who knows what we'll present.
Thank you.
next
Thank
time.
you very much. I am, just keep us in mind, and to be locally and to have people recognize what I said earlier about our occupation in this part of North America goes back 13,500 years. When I say I'm living in my hometown, I really mean it.
I know you do.
And the teachings, again, some have been severed, but it hasn't been severed entirely. And what is unknown to us, which is, I think we should remember that there is the mystery in the world, and that's what keeps us, if we recognize there is a mystery, keeps us safe and keeps us questioning and keeps us far from danger. And when we cross that line, that's when we get in trouble. So, again, the dream time, our Atashwins, our spirit helpers, our what other people refer to as guardian angels, they're always with us. We walk with our ancestors, and we do rely on their protection and their foresight in giving us our dreams and our visions. So thank you, everyone, for the beautiful evening, and blessed, as we come to this end of the year in which we pay our reciprocity. We pray for those who have died and those of us who will die, remembering everything that has been given to us this year, good and bad. that we learned
Yes.
from it
On this Christian calendar.
on all calendars.
Well, I would say this is where I would take the opportunity to say the Celtic calendar, the New Year
Yep.
started November
Yeah.
1st.
Right, yeah.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
so that is, it is interesting, the traditions that we learn and know.
Mhm, mhm,
And I will say this, that if we can build trust, and that's part of the purpose of the
Yeah.
Ventura County Interfaith Community,
mhm,
then we open the doors to learn more.
mhm.
And we would understand all of better those we live with and want to grow with.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, again, that particular invitation to each person here to join us again and to open those doors, so we can build trust.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Blessed be.
Blessed be. Amen.
Amen. Mhm.